So, Renato, we've heard the audio tape and it sounds pretty bad. Is this the smoking gun?
It's complicated.
I'm Asha Rangappa. I teach national security law at Yale University. I'm a former FBI special agent, and I'm a legal contributor for ABC News.
And I'm Renato Mariotti. I'm a former federal prosecutor, a practicing lawyer, and a legal analyst.
And we're here to help you understand topics that can't be boiled down to a soundbite or a tweet. So, Lordy, there are tapes.
Indeed. Now, here's the thing. I have to say, Ash, this is they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I think this tape is worth more than that, because I heard the word, read the words in the indictment. They're spelled out in the indictment, and it's way worse when you listen to it, isn't it? Than it read in the indictment.
Yeah. So I'm interested in unpacking this with you, because when I read the indictment, it's like, okay, this definitely shows like state of mind. It undermines some of the defenses that he could put up, but in terms of like its probative value, like kind of affirmatively to prove like an element, I don't know that it was clear. And it seems like when you hear it, though, when you hear the rustling and you hear the reactions of the people around him, and you can kind of almost visualize like what he's doing, it seems like it is more than just state of mind or obliterating defenses.
Yeah, there's a couple things in there that, and I have not, Asha, since listening to this audio, I don't know, a few hundred times, between or whatever, between, being on Twitter or CNN, different times talking about it. I did not go back into the indictment and like compare like word for word, but a couple of things. I think he did include some like ellipses, dot in the indictment to kind of focus on the parts that he thought were he being Jack Smith, thought were legally important. And I think actually that context matters here. In other words, like one thing that they do in this is they're like making fun of Hillary Clinton for allegedly mishandling classified information while he is showing somebody else classified information. Like, it's like sort of bizarre, right? And then his tone, he's like,
this totally wins my case, Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this. You attack, and
Hillary would print that out all the time,
she'd send it to Anthony Weiner, the pervert. By the way, isn't that incredible? Though?
Yeah.
I was just saying, because we were talking about it, and he said he wanted to attack Iran and what? These are the papers. This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
declassify.
Figure out
See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
Now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Which it goes to motive of why he's showing them and held on to him in the first place. And then I'd say, on top of all of that, I mean, one thing that was present in the indictment, but it was just words, or like they'll be like rustling of papers, right? Is how they kind of describe it in the indictment. But when you actually listen to the whole thing in context, it sure sounds like he's got a document there and he's talking about that specific document and he's showing it to him and holding it up for him. It's like, look at this, right? This is what Millie prepared for me. And then that sound like what he's saying in that context. Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't sound like he's holding up a Time magazine, right?
It's total BS. Yeah, the idea that he's doing that.
Something, and it's not just that he's holding it up and saying, like, look at this or whatever. There's a reaction from the people that he's talking to which conveys that they're seeing something that surprises them and kind of shocks them. And so you can kind of almost visualize a document that literally has top secret on the top, because, classification markings are always are prominently displayed on the top of the document. I mean, that's kind of how I visualized it. They would need a corroborating witness to verify that. But it certainly doesn't seem like he's just waving around, some paper that has a lot of text on it and saying that it's war plans for Iran, and the other people are like, amazed by that. Like there's something there that they're reacting to.
Right. It's not like he's holding up a clipping from the New York Times or something. I thought that was very bizarre. It's a very bizarre defense, and the sort of thing that is easily disproven if you interview the people there. Although, to be fair, they may be super Trumpers who are going to say anything, right? You have some of these people are willing to say basically anything to defend Trump.
You think they'll lie for him? I mean, so Jack Smith would have. They would have interviewed all the people that were there for that audio, right?
You would think. I don't know. I would assume. I would presume that would be the careful thing to do, and I assume that they would. But all I'm saying is that that would be my assumption. In an ordinary case, I would practically guarantee that. I would assume these people are all going to say that they were. They saw some top secret document being held in front of them. But with Trump, you never know. But yeah, the fact that there's a number of people there makes it harder too, right? Because they all would have to tell the same lie, and they're probably not going to risk doing that.
Wait, can I stop for 1 second there? So, he's, if we look at the content of this audio, let's stipulate that he's actually showing, he's waving around a top secret document and other people are able to see it. Jack Smith is not charging Trump with dissemination. Like that's not something that he needs to prove that Trump showed it or passed it to someone unauthorized. But would it be fair to say that his cavalier attitude towards the classified information gets to the willfulness of the willful retention?
So that's that. Thank you, Asha, for really getting to the heart of the matter here. Okay. And because I think your comment is adjacent to or corresponds to an argument that we've been starting to see a lot on Twitter. It was also on television. For those of you who have been listening to other lawyers talk about this, there's people concerned that maybe this document is not even admissible. Because the charges, as you point out, it's not dissemination of some document in Bedminster. In fact, he wouldn't have venue to charge dissemination of a document in Bedminster. The charges are these willful retentions of other documents, presumably not the attack plans for Iran that were being held up, which have never been recovered, as far as we know. And so, is this even relevant for purposes of the federal rules of evidence? And so, one argument people are making, and there's something to this argument, but I think a lot less than is being let on, which is really something, because usually it goes the other way. People have all these explosive comments that are overblown. This is a little. Everyone else is being the sad panda here in this circumstance. Maybe it could be the happy panda today. People are basically saying, look, they charge these 31 documents that he knows are NDI. He can prove are NDI, National Defense Information. Essentially, this is a pre-classification era statute. So that's what matters under the Espionage Act. And this other document happened in New Jersey, is not, first of all, he can't prove it's National Defense Information. So what he did in New Jersey has nothing to do with this. So therefore, it's not admissible. And I think the way that's going to play out, and so it's like, and I'll give you an analogy. There are like a very basic federal crime that's charged all the time is bank robbery. It's like if you robbed these 4 banks, if I want to introduce the fact that you robbed a 5th bank, well, that's like a really difficult thing to get in to evidence, because it's like a whole other bad act that you've done. And that's how Trump's team would try to characterize this. Like they're trying to use this other bad thing he did up in New Jersey to prove his guilt. I think a lot of judges would say that this goes to his state of mind regarding, like you said, willfulness. It basically shows that during the exact same time period that he was retaining classified docs, he was very cavalier in his attitude towards keeping the classified docs, showing the classified docs to others and everything, it goes towards his state of mind. And they probably would let it in. But if you are doing this as sort of like, if the judge, and this is Aileen Cannon now that we're talking about, if she views this as sort of like a separate bad act that occurred in New Jersey, there is a more strenuous, like a higher bar for this to come in. The problem is, I mean, first of all, most judges, like I said, would just let it in, I think, in the front end. But even let's just say that Aileen Cannon said, okay, we're keeping this out because this is not directly relevant to anything. It really puts Trump's team in a box. Here's why. There's no question that this is directly relevant to rebut his defenses in the case. And so as soon, if they wanted to keep this out, if I was Jack Smith, I would take that trade. It's like, okay, I'm happy. We'll keep it out. And then you throughout the entire trial can't say anything about declassification and moving your arm, moving your hands and everything's declassified or any of this other BS that you've got. And as soon as you even hint at it, this document comes in. So I think that as a practical...
And you can't claim that they were your personal records, right? Or
none of that stuff, because you knew better. You knew that, right? You knew that wasn't the case. So I think that is a practical matter. It's never going to work out cleanly where this isn't in. And I think Jack Smith had the same analysis I did, which is why I put it in the indictment. I've written a lot of indictments in my life, indictments in cases at least I thought were high profile, or certainly there was very sophisticated, rich adversaries on the other side. And I was super careful not to put stuff in the indictment if I thought I wouldn't get it in evidence, because I knew the other side would be crowing to the jury a closing argument about it. Hey, Mariotti said he was going to prove this. Look at this in the indictment. He didn't do it. And that happens all the time. I've had fancy lawyers from the Wall Street law firms claim that I did that when that wasn't the case. They'll certainly do it if you don't put in a piece of evidence. And so I think Smith thinks he's going to get it in, and I could see why.
So he's not charging him with having, classified documents at Bedminster, but doesn't that... I'm just wondering if there's like a way of we have someone who's testifying that he was, he was waving around a classified document in Bedminster, which is not a SCIF, and he was not authorized to have it, which gets to the crime that he's being charged. Or is that too tenuous?
I mean, I think, first of all, your point is, could he be charged in Bedminster? Maybe. I don't know what other evidence they have. I would have to think that
they would need that document, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they can't really prove what's on it. It's just the sort of thing, like, you would not usually want to charge that if you have a more solid case in Florida. And I would think they already would have. Already people are starting, I hope, to see that, like, this idea that you're going to have a trial in this year in 2023 is becoming increasingly unlikely. I mean, we could talk about the delays. Walt Nauta has not even been arraigned yet. Much less have his lawyers go through clearance and this and that. The idea that he would try to slow things down by having that would slow things down if he waits a couple months and then indicts in New Jersey, and you have yet another lawsuit about similar, or another, complaint, federal indictment about. You have another federal indictment about similar sorts of crimes in another jurisdiction. I mean, he could, but it's just, I just don't think that's likely to happen. So, but I think it's relevant to show Trump's state of mind. And I think that's why he included it in the indictment. Before we move on, one thing I do think is worth noting, because while you were off drinking wine, not eating gelato, but drinking wine in Italy, Brian Greer and I talked about a lot last week about the Fox News interview. And I just want everybody who is listening to understand a bit of a contrast between this. The Fox News video, one thing that I really laid out for everyone is why Jack Smith probably won't even use the Fox interview. I mean, he could do it. It's possible, but it would not be the typical prosecutor's playbook. The typical prosecutor's playbook is, I am not going to put on a video in which you state some of your defenses in it, because I am going to force you to take the stand if you want to get that crap in front of the jury. I'm not going to let you put your defenses on through some video. You're going to have to get cross-examined by me if you want to do it. This is totally different because there's nothing good for Trump on this recording.
Right.
Like literally nothing from beginning to end. Like the last words are him asking for a Coke after he's showing people documents. Do you have an aide? He's like, man, this is a problem. I mean, there's just nothing good for him on this entire recording. If I was a prosecutor, I'd have no problem playing it because it's just completely incriminating. And that's why it's in the indictment.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I had some people on my Substack Zoom office hours asking, people keep saying that Trump is, when he does these interviews and says all these things and these defenses and, misquotes the Presidential Records Act or whatever, that he's trying to muddy the waters. But how would this evidence get in front of a jury unless Jack Smith brought it in or Trump testified? And I said, my understanding of the idea that he's trying to muddy the waters is that he is trying to confuse the court of public opinion in order to delegitimize any outcome that comes out of this trial and then possibly maybe taint a jury pool. Like, I don't think that the issue is that he is trying to actually plans to sway the jury with this kind of stuff.
I agree with you that that's exactly what he's trying to do. I couldn't have said that better myself. I agree 100% with your take on that, is not unsurprisingly. I'd say separately from that, good trial lawyers to criminal defense attorneys will find ways to get these ideas in front of the jury. And you may consider some of those methods improper or bending the rules or whatever, but it's like if you're watching an MMA fight, okay, it's not, it is what it is. People kick each other, I mean, it's just, or whatever they're doing. I mean, it's a fight. And that's the same thing. A criminal trial is like a knife fight. You have to know when to be aggressive. You have to know when to just maybe go up to the edge of the rules. Just the reality of things. So defense attorneys are going to ask questions that'll talk about the Presidential Act throughout. They'll make arguments. They'll put in the opening and the closing arguments where they'll say that's what he could have thought. That's what it could have been in his mind. They'll introduce that as an argument, not as evidence. And they'll do enough about that. They'll try to find various documents that they can, or things that they can introduce, try to find ways of getting that in front of the jury without calling Trump. So they will get the idea in front of the jury, but it's going to have very little weight if the jury only hears about it through the attorneys, because they're going to be like, what is this? Do you have to do it anything? If there isn't like a video like that or Trump testifying, it's going to be really hard, which is why, by the way, I mean, that video or that Fox News interview was not the first time Trump said crazy stuff like that about the Presidential Records Act. You don't see any of that in the indictment. You see stuff that Trump said previously about, Hillary Clinton in the indictment. And you see this recording that we just heard recently in the indictment. You don't see any of that stuff.
Yeah. I do think that he's going to try to force his lawyers to make this Presidential Records Act argument.
Oh, they will. I think that's the only defense he has left.
And I'm actually worried that Aileen Cannon is going to bite on it.
Well, I mean, that I just would say for all of this, like, when people are saying, too, it's like I get this question, it's like, well, couldn't she exclude this evidence? I mean, she could do what she wants. And I mean, I think you and I have talked about, right? I think just before you went on your trip, we talked about how
she can do really bad things.
Yeah, she could tank the whole case. So if that's what you're concerned about, it is what it is. But in a normal land, that's going nowhere.
Yeah, so there's 84 witnesses that the Department of Justice has asked to be placed under seal. And that is the idea there, that to not let Trump know who the witnesses are so he can't go intimidate and tamper with them?
I think that, I mean, his lawyers not only can tell him who the witnesses are, that they have the right to do it. I think the idea is the DOJ wanted to put the witness list under seal because they didn't want the average like right-wing nut job attacker to know who they were and go like hunting them down. But I will just tell you, this is very, very unusual thing that DOJ is doing. You know, their usual tack on this case has been, hey, let's treat this like any other case. Like, we're ready for our speedy trial. We're ready to go. We're going to treat this like any other case. This is not like any other case. I mean, the way it usually works is you're indicted. You have no idea what the witness list is. You get a bunch of discovery. You can guess who the witnesses are. I mean, some of the people you see the grand jury test, or you see whatever. You usually, by the way, don't get the grand jury testimony if you're on the defense side till like 2-3 weeks before trial. And that's about the time you get a witness list. And the witness list includes 84 names. The government ends up calling 20 of them. I mean, 84 is even long, but you know, in a typical case, they might put 30 names on the witness list, call 15 of them. And you don't know early on. And it's certainly not like, this is one spot, Ash, I agree with Aileen Cannon. You don't file that with the court. You know, sometimes you do, but it's very late in the game. But you often just exchange that. So it's an interesting. It was an interesting time where the DOJ was trying to do something outside the box.
Trump is barred from contacting these witnesses, though, right?
Yes, yes, he is. You know, but whether that's going to be enforceable or how that's going to be enforced, I don't know. Now, obviously, if he contacts someone and there's like evidence, like there's solid evidence that he's tampering with witnesses, sure, they could supersede and add a charge, although that's going to delay things. And you know, or they could use that evidence at trial, potentially to show consciousness of guilt or something else. But well, you know, I don't know whether that'll ever be proven.
I think we need to be prepared that that's going to happen, right? I mean, let's just go back down memory lane. I mean, he intimidated Michael Cohen, you know, on Twitter. He was dangling pardons for other witnesses to not testify. He had, you know, some lackey called Cassidy Hutchinson on the slide to kind of, you know, let her know that, you know, she doesn't really need, she can just be silent, or she can say that she doesn't remember. I forget what the instruction was. Like, you don't have to remember everything. Yeah, it was really weird. So, you know, he is a serial witness tamperer, and justice obstructor. And so I guess, and in this case, I think we can probably be confident that, because I think the court also has the power, right, to hold someone in contempt if they're doing things like that, even if they aren't actually charged with another crime.
That's right. I mean, so when you're released on bond, there are conditions of release. If you violate the conditions of release, you usually end up back in front of the judge, and the judge can modify your bond or there's all sorts of powers that the judge has when you're violating the conditions of release, because that's a kind of a separate power that the judge has over you without getting to the merits of the underlying case. But obviously, you know, tampering with a witness potentially could be much greater than that. I think, you know, one thing that is common amongst all the things you said is a lot of them are kind of, I'll call them looks like witness tampering, but whether it's chargeable is a different thing. Like, they're all things that will cause a lot of people on Twitter to say this looks like witness tampering, but like whether it actually is something you charge, I don't know, like the Cassidy Hutchinson thing and so on. But yeah, I think that's, there's all sorts of ways there could be potential consequences, but I suspect that there won't be. In other words, I suspect, my gut is, what's likely to happen is there'll be some handed attempts to do whatever, and it won't really amount to much. No one's like, people won't pick up the calls. Nothing's going to happen. Like the statements will be vague enough, and it'll just sort of fall by the wayside. I could be wrong, and I don't know what way that cuts, whether it's good or bad, but we'll see.
We'll see.
So, Asha, you are gone. You are out of the country.
Yep.
And warlord took took that opportunity. He's like, now that Asha is not on the ball, not like focused
Not on the watch,
my country,
not on the wall. Yeah,
you're not on the watch. He's like, okay, I'm going to engage in like a mutiny against Vladimir Putin. Maybe you should go on vacation more often.
Yeah, that was some crazy stuff.
Yeah, that was really something, right? Like it looked like he's like booking it to Moscow. It's like, what's this guy going to do? I mean, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so Yevgeny Prigozhin, I've been watching on Twitter for a little while because I follow a lot of the people who are reporting about the war in Ukraine, and he's been spouting off about Putin for a little while. So this little rumbling has been kind of brewing, and I think it's been really interesting to watch because people are like, yeah, there's some op happening here because there's no way that he would be so openly criticizing Putin. Like this is some kind of theater or fake out or whatever, And I teach classes on information warfare and who's the best. It's the Russians. And, Prigozhin, P.S., among the many things that he does, including running a private mercenary group, the Wagner group, he also runs the Internet Research Agency, which is the St. Petersburg troll farm. So, in my class, we, learn about the Internet Research Agency and how it functions and the Mueller indictment that, charged them, et cetera. So, he is, this whole idea of kind of creating narratives in the information space is something that both he and Putin are good at. And so, and you saw this through the weekend, right? Like you're seeing this back and forth and you're like, is it real? Like, can we really rely on what they're saying? And then, the secondary level was, not even being able to verify, like, what was actually happening. Like there was so much caution about, even from like, the best news agencies, because you didn't have reporters on the ground because Putin's kicked them all out to be able to report accurately. And I think it's just a really interesting illustration of how much our perceptions of reality are shaped by this information space, and it can be manipulated or whatever. And so the fact that in the end, he was like, I guess, marching on Moscow. I don't really understand what happened. So he's marching on Moscow. Then he was like, okay, no, I'll just go to Belarus, and like went to Belarus and was hanging out in witness protection. And now he's back out yelling at Putin, and Putin is really mad.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that either. I mean, I think it's almost like here is the best I could figure out from this, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in this subject, but it seemed like either there's one of two things. Either and I think this is the more likely one, that he thought that if he, took this headquarters of the Southern Army and then marched, took some more cities and marched towards Moscow, that it would cause elements within the Russian army to, rise up against Putin. Particularly, there's a couple of units that guard Moscow, and he thought that maybe they would agree to join in, and then that would be it. Like if the guards kind of go flip and go on your side, then it's game over. And he may have gotten word or had communications, and he heard word back that they're going to fight. And he's like, yeah, I'm marching 25,000 people up at Moscow and have like a bloody battle in which most of my guys are going to die. And maybe maybe we won't, but it's just going to be bad for everybody. Alternatively, he just didn't have a plan. Like there's often times where people do really stupid things like that, or very daring things, and they don't really have like a plan. I mean, this happens with criminals all the time. Like they have this great idea, like I'm going to rob a bank or do something. And then they're like, okay, now what? Like they've robbed the bank, or they've defrauded somebody or done something else evil, and they don't really know what to do next. So I don't know which of them it is, but I mean, I thought it was interesting. It seemed like a little ill-conceived, almost like in the way that January 6th was, right? Like, I mean, certainly there was a plan there that was coming from people that were higher up, but a lot of people on the ground, like, it was not clear, like, what was their plan? Like, they were like going into the Capitol.
Yeah. I mean, I have to think that there was a plan. I mean, it just seems like bad idea genes to just suddenly be like, I'm turning around and I'm going to march on the Kremlin, and like on a whim. That doesn't seem like something you would just do because you just are kind of mad, like road rage type of thing, right? So it sounds like it. I would be more inclined to put some weight on the theory that there was a hope that doing like this march would then somehow trigger other elements to rise up, etc. The negotiation to return to Belarus is also super odd because even if at that point you're like, okay, this is not a winning proposition for me, my plan did not work out as planned. Belarus is not like a safe haven from Vladimir Putin because Lukashenko is his Vladdy Daddy, and right? Am I missing something? And Putin is not, he's not like a bygones guy, right? Like if you cross him, you basically get a choice of polonium or getting pushed out of a window. So I'm just like, how is this a safe, like, hey, like what is the point here?
Yeah, I think this guy, my assumption is this guy's got 60 days to live or so. Although, I wonder though, on the other hand, so one thing I think part of the reason this guy chose Belarus is this guy's like a brutal Russian, like evil dude himself, right? I mean, he's the guy who's behind the Internet Research Agency. He was like a Putin lackey. Wasn't he like Putin's chef or something?
So he owns a catering company called Concord Catering. Which I guess catered stuff for Putin. So yeah, he's known as Putin's chef because of his catering company.
So there's a lot of stuff there. So he's not like somebody who's going to just like defect to Ukraine or Germany or something, right? Like we'd probably prosecute him. He'd probably, if he defected to the United States, he'd probably end up in federal prison. So he's probably
he's
has limited
by the FBI
options
already.
Yeah. So my point is he's not like going someplace to he has to go someplace. He can't go to the West. He can't go anywhere that's got like an extradition treaty with the United States or that would extradite him. So he had limited options. And I think his hope has got to be, and it's that Putin thinks he's better alive than dead, because if he's dead, then he's like a murderer or something, or there'll be like a head of the snake is killed. And I don't know.
Or he's got some leverage. I mean, I don't know what that would be besides your, whatever 50,000 person private army. But I don't know, maybe information, something that, is going to, but it's clearly not holding because basically they're both back out spouting at each other. The last I had turned on the news. So this détente, if you will, is not holding. And it's interesting because I was talking with a colleague who is a, Eastern Europe, Russia expert, and said that the vibes, it has a very Berlin Wall falling vibe, like, in that era where things were happening very fast and the system is sort of crumbling but you're not really sure. That was what she was likening it to. And I think precisely for that reason, I do think it's really interesting that the U.S., is sort of like kind of staying on the down low and just sort of watching it all play out.
Well, that's a great analogy, Asha. It's a really good one because you and I grew up. We knew that era. Like we were there. We weren't in Berlin, but we were watching that unfold on the news, and it seemed like out of nowhere. Like before then, I had always thought of the Soviet Union as this massive force of evil and a rival and yada yada yada, and then suddenly just like starting to fall apart. Yeah. It happened really quickly. And here with Putin, I mean, one of my first reactions was like, okay, does this mean I'm not going to hear people on Fox News praising Putin or at CPAC or all these right wingers like suddenly talking about how amazing Putin is? Is Trump going to no longer hold up Putin as the most amazing thing, most amazing leader in the world? Is he going to switch to Xi or whomever, Kim Jong-un or his new dictator friend? I just think that was my reaction to it, because it seemed so sudden, and it seemed to me like there's a bubble that burst here where people realize, okay, he's not as strong as we thought.
Right. And just to bring this full circle, Vladimir Putin was assigned to Dresden as a KGB officer when the Berlin Wall fell. And basically, they're holed up in this, KGB office in East Germany, and everybody knows that's a KGB headquarters. Berlin Wall falls. It gets surrounded by, I guess, a mob or something with, torches and pitchforks, because it's finally like, they're free. And he calls to Moscow and asks, when are they sending, like, are you sending backup? And basically there's like no response. And then there's a communication that says Moscow's not coming. Like, they're like, you're on your own. And so he has like PTSD from this, and like that formative moment, was like, the ultimate humiliation, I guess, for him, for Mother Russia, like all this stuff. And it kind of drives this idea to rebuild, the Russian Empire, or the Soviet Empire, because like of that, helplessness and humiliation that he actually witnessed when the Berlin Wall fell. So it's actually interesting now that he is at the top as kind of a similar phenomenon is happening. And I wonder if it's giving him like, flashbacks.
Wow. That's really interesting. And it's a reminder. I mean, if, what was happening during this crisis, he's scrambling, trying to get out of the country, right, for a period of time, and wasn't able to do that. Very similar to that time when Gorbachev was trying to, he ended up, there was a coup, and right, and everything else. So very interesting, and I think a good explanation of maybe what he's thinking right now. It's got to be a very dark time for Vladimir Putin.
Dark times. And I'll just add in one more thing, which is there was definitely a spike in FBI and CIA recruitment following the fall of the Soviet Union, because you had a period of uncertainty and you don't know what's going to happen. And at that point, hey, like, doesn't look so bad to like, cash in some secrets and make a life for yourself somewhere where you're not going to get embroiled in like a civil war or killed by, criminal thugs or whoever's taking over the country at that time. And it's really interesting because, on Twitter, and I'm sure in a number of different channels and fora, but I definitely saw the ad on Twitter, which is by the FBI in Russian, that's sort of like, give us the call, and I'm betting that they're making some good recruitments right now. And it's really important because some of those post Cold War recruitments that happened during the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Soviet Union ended up being really critical for things that we discovered later, like the illegals program that was happening here and all of those stuff. So anyway, so it's just really interesting to think about how this benefits us and our intelligence capabilities. And the icing on the cake is that it's at Putin's expense. So before we go, I thought we could talk about boy state and girl state.
Wait, what?
Do you know this?
No, what are you talking about?
Okay. I feel like nobody knows about this, and this was such a big deal when I was growing up.
I have no idea what you're talking about. So, I'm like, what?
Okay, so boy state and girl state are programs that are sponsored by the American Legion in every state. And basically it's a selective program between your junior and senior years. You go somewhere for a week, usually college campus. They assign you to a town, and they also assign you to a political party. And the idea is to teach you how to to teach you about government. So you run for office, whether it's city council or state representative or state senator, or governor, or all of these different lieutenant governor, all of these different offices. And there's Supreme Court justices, and you basically form a government. And so you're giving speeches, you're campaigning. There's, for each political party, there's a whole party infrastructure that's there. So you can be like the Ron McDaniel of whatever the party is. And it's really fascinating and cool. I did Virginia Girls State when I was in high school. And do you know that famous photo of Bill Clinton shaking John F. Kennedy's hand?
Of course.
Yeah. So that is so when you go to Boys State or Girl State and you run for senator, each Boys State and Girl State elects 2 senators. Those senators get to go to Boys and Girls Nation.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. And then a part of going to Boys and Girls Nation is you get to meet the President of the United States. And so that picture of Bill Clinton shaking John F. Kennedy's hand, I believe, I'm sure, because I remember thinking about this when I learned it, is that he was at Boys Nation.
That's amazing. I had no idea what you're talking about. This is fascinating. I feel like I missed out on a lot of things as a kid, but that's definitely one of them. That's really amazing.
Well, I think, and I just wonder if it's just bigger in they definitely have it in all 50 states, because my son, the reason I'm talking about this, my son is at Boys State right now.
Oh, wow.
And while we were on this podcast, he texted me to tell me that he won he's won an election for state representative, and he has the nomination for state treasurer for his party.
That's great.
So he won his primary. So anyway, so that's what got me thinking about it. But there's also a great documentary called Boys State, which is about Texas Boys State, and it's actually fantastic. You should watch it.
That's super cool. I did. I remember we did we had different forms of debate. I was the captain of the debate team in high school, and we did.
Of course you were.
And we did student government. As one, or not student government, I'm sorry. Student Congress was one of the forms of it, where you would go and you had to try to get elected, and you were members of Congress and all this. That was one of the forms. I think I did that freshman year and went to state for Student Congress before I switched to a different form of debate. But that's what reminded me a little bit of that, but it was very different. There you're trying to pass bills, and it was like a form of debate or something.
I did Model Congress.
Okay, so similar.
Actually, I didn't do Model Congress. I helped run Model Congress, I think, my freshman year in college for the high school students, because then we went and they were all these high school delegations. So I think that's what I did. I did Model UN in high school and mock trial. I was a witness. I always liked being a witness because I could do my theatrical stuff.
See, that's the part of the problem with. So I was the mock trial coach for the University of Chicago undergrads for a period of time when I was a federal prosecutor. And I'm like, oh, this can be super easy. I've tried a lot of cases. It's going to be very easy to be a mock trial coach. This, very easy. It has nothing at all like a regular trial, because the witnesses are all trying to help. They have a side. They're trying to,
right. They're not help make the case.
Yeah, they're trying to throw the case for whoever's questioning them. And they didn't actually experience the stuff. So they basically are making it up, and they slant the facts. Even though they have a fact sheet, they're slanting it. It's all about who can slant the facts in some way that throws off the other side and helps themselves. So it's just nothing to do with a real life trial at all, and how a witness would actually be. So I'm teaching them how to cross-examine, and it just never worked out the way that I was bad. I was a bad mock trial coach because I was trying to teach real trial as opposed to mock trial. So
I remember my star role in mock trial was a gum popping truck stop waitress.
Oh, I could see that for you, 100%. I could see that.
Yeah, it was really fun. That was a good role for me. Yeah. So yeah, fun times. Check out the documentary Boy State.
Wow, very cool. Will do.
MSW Media.